Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited about today's conversation. I'm Zach Seagle. I'm from the Agora Academy, where we work with young people in wilderness expeditions. And we're at the SolSeed podcast studio. It's new. It's really beautiful. We're really excited about this conversation in Pisac, Peru. I'm here with a dear friend, fellow teacher, fellow brother in the medicine path, Brian Beloved. And today we're going to have an amazing conversation on depth, the meaning of depth, the polycrisis, how we move from crisis to contribution, how we can restore depth in a chaotic world. So I'm really excited about this conversation. It's a winding, twisting path through a myriad of different topics, and I'm looking forward to it. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
I'm super excited about this conversation. That's going to be a wild ride. Yeah, why don't you kick us off with what we're talking about today?
So our title is From Crisis to Contribution, Restoring Depth in a Chaotic World.
This is going to be really, I think, rich.
Super juicy topic.
And I love our just natural conversation when we just go off on lots of tangents and weave in myth and all sorts of things from here. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Let's start with what brought us to this work. What is our background on this topic, and specifically around restoring depth? You want to kick us off?
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of my life has been centered around mythology. Ever since I was a child, I lived in a very chaotic family system, and I remember around 5, just like taking a mythology book, Greek mythology off the shelf at a very chaotic 4th of July party, and just going into a side room and like really immersing myself into the myths. And that was the first time I think that like nature really spoke to me. And then it was a long life of like, I really had this understanding from an early age that like something is profoundly out of sync. Out of attunement or out of alignment. I didn't have the words for it at this time, but I spent most of my life trying to figure out this question of like, what are the roots of this? Like, where did this come from? Myth was certainly an aspect of like trying to understand that from a story lens. But I spent a lot of my life in West Africa or the Middle East or South America, roaming around trying to figure out like, why is the world like it is? I studied history and political science, always like kind of dabbled in economics. So I was trying to figure out from different lenses, like what is the issue? Like why is the world the way it is? How did we get here? And eventually that landed me teaching and being a school administrator for 12 years and really trying to address the issues that I saw in the world from an educational standpoint. And eventually that would land me in the jungle and working with indigenous medicines. And that's when it started to really calcify for me of like, oh, okay, I really want to go into the roots of like, what is the crisis? What is this crisis of meaning? So it's a little bit about my journey, winding pathways to where we are today.
And what was like a specific landing spot? Where was like a specific memory where it's like you felt like you really landed in beginning to have an answer to this question?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I really think when I started to see that the world had been divided into two, where light was worshipped and darkness was really relegated to what we would call evil. I grew up Christian, evangelical, and so that worldview was presented to me, but I think it was a long journey of like unpacking like, oh, actually, what I think is at the root of our crisis of meaning, and we'll unpack that a little bit later too, is that we really began to say light, good, dark, bad. And that to me is like a mythopoetic like issue. It's not so much like, I think everything that we see as part of the crisis is a symptom of this division that we've created.
Beautiful.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, so restoring depth and meaning. I think of my growing up as also like cookie cutter Christianity, going to church, getting good grades in school, going to college. And there was a moment when it turned for me. I was initially going to college for IT and web design and all that stuff. Something shifted in me where I really wanted to study psychology, and I really wanted to contribute in a big way and understand psyche, the soul, the body. I think it was like something illuminating in my own sense of self, and just like, wow, I have a lot of anxiety, you know? And so I graduated, I went and got a master's and worked in schools as a psychologist, and it was like just deeply in touch with kids with autism, kids with learning disabilities, kids who didn't fit in. And it seems like it's just more and more prevalent these days of like outside the norm kind of things. And at some point doing that work, it was very, very fruitful. I enjoyed it so much, and I felt like I had a life that had a sense of meaning and purpose in terms of service to children and service to education. But at some point, it wasn't what I needed myself to explore my own depths. I realized that I was doing that very stereotypical giving to others, but not really looking within myself. And it was actually sitting with Aya for the first time in California that really like opened that up to me. This sense of like, wow, there's a vast wellspring that's within me to go out and explore. And I was also studying with a teacher, Reggie Ray, who was a student of Chogyam Trungpa. So it's like Tibetan Buddhist lineage, which is all about exploring the mystery of the body. And getting into yoga as well. So it's just like all of these things like kind of coalesced for me at the same point around 2013 through 2017, doing all that work, and then getting ready, like being like, I'm going to Peru. And I remember my first invitation from my friend Trishana, and it was just like a 12-day trip, but we did get to see all of the sacred sites and end up in Pisac and sat with the Shipibo Maestro for 3 nights in a row. And it like completely opened me in a beautiful way. And I'm the kind of guy who was like I was holding on to my emotion, suppressing my emotion to not feel because it felt really chaotic, and allowing myself to open up the wells of my eyes and cry deeply and grieve for, I don't know what, it's just like everything that I had been holding all my life. And that was 2018. And 2019, I came back for 6 months and was sitting with Diego Palma at La Pacha for like that entire duration pretty much. And just opening me over and over and over. And I just see it's like this flower that's just blooming. And this is when we get into restoring depth for me, is this like seeing the bigger picture and taking our time. Nature takes its time to unfold and to blossom, and even has cycles of death and rebirth. And it's important to honor that. So yeah, a lot of it for me is allowing that previous identity to die. And I was very attached to like being a psychologist. Like, what? I trained my whole life for this. Like, why would I give this up? And the deeper part of me, when I got to listen to it, my soul, my daemon, that seed, that spark, is telling me, move to Peru.
Yeah.
And keep doing this work and find your way and trust that.
Yeah, I always forget we have so many of these similar. We know each other in this context of living in Peru and working with the medicines and with a lot more maturation at this point. But it's so funny when I've heard your story multiple times, and I'm still always surprised of like we both have this education background, this like sort of like savior martyr complex that a lot of like 20-year-olds have, who are really curious. I think we both share a lot of curiosity of like why the world is the way it is. How did it get here? And finding ourselves both in schools, working with children, something is, and then eventually like something, for me, it was like, I loved that job. That was my favorite job. Like teaching was so much fun. I woke up every morning being like, wow, I'm so blessed that like someone is paying me to do this thing because it's so cool. But it's really hard. And I didn't realize the toll that it had on my body because I wasn't, now looking back, like I wasn't mature enough to actually be in that position. And it's unfortunate that our society just throws 20-year-olds into these schools and working with children. And I eventually like burnt out. I started working with also in San Francisco with ayahuasca, and it took me about 4 years. Like all of my early journeys were like really blissful. Like it opened up. At that point, I had rejected Christianity. I rejected religion. I was like, I am a square like materialist, rationalist. I believe in science. I'm a progressive politically, and that was the direct opposite of my upbringing, where it was religious fundamentalism. It was looking at the world through a Christian evangelical lens. And I remember just like picking up this book. I was studying theology. And in Memphis, when I started teaching, I remember just like I was in the middle of this 400-page book on the Old Testament. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with this bullshit. And I just closed it. And I was like, I'm not religious by any means. And then it was a few years of that, of just like living a very materialist, very sort of progressive political life. I worked on campaigns. I was still trying different avenues of addressing this issue that I saw in society. But I really believed that society could be engineered into utopia through like sound policy, science, rationalization. And it wasn't until I got to San Francisco where I was introduced to a tradition of the Ashaninka. In ayahuasca, I had no idea what this was. I sat in my first ceremony having zero clue what ayahuasca was, zero prep. The curandera at the time, like, definitely gave me the instructions, but it was so out of my field of reference that I was like, okay, we're just doing a drug, whatever. And then I get the ceremony, and before the medicine even goes through my body, I've only had this experience twice. My very first ceremony and my very last ceremony, where I drank the medicine, and before it even hit my lips, I was already in that space. And at that moment, I was like, wow, I'm going to go through a really profound change, and I have no idea what this looks like. But I knew I had stepped into something really sacred, and it opened up this, like, it opened up this field of awareness of like, I'm going to shift my worldview. Like, I'm so deeply curious of what's happening here. And it took another 4 years to get to the jungle. And my first 4 years of working with medicine was like really blissful. Like it relieved a lot of anxiety. I had always like sort of teetered on the depression scale. It gave me a sense of like new life and new aliveness of like mission and purpose. And it wasn't until I like deeply stepped into the dieta world that my first experience was pretty sour. It was a very, very hard experience. And that was sort of my maturation with the medicine. Before then, I would have described myself as like an ayahuasca evangelical. I was going around to my other friends being like, you have to take this. This will change your life, yada, yada. And then it wasn't until I got more serious into a study with the Ashaninka out of Mayantiacu outside of Pucallpa here in Peru, that the medicine started taking me into a much more serious path. And then the ayahuasca world and the medicine world and the spiritual world started becoming a lot more complex. And I think that's one of the ways in which I personally found a lot more of my own depth was like wrestling with the complexity of things and the nuance. Contextualization is I studied history, and that was always kind of a historical term, but then it started to take on a new lens for me when I started to work with medicine in a much more serious way as a student, where like depth, complexity, nuance, paradox, complexity all became sort of like my inner mantra of like, wow, there aren't a lot of easy answers. There's a lot of gray, and there's a lot of, there's still a lot of mystery out there, and I really don't even know what I'm doing.
I think this is a great time to go into the myth of the Hydra.
Yeah.
Yeah, exploring complexity and paradox. And Yeah, the root of it all.
I'm curious from your perspective,
Yeah.
how would you describe what we call the polycrisis? Because that's a little bit of what we're talking about, is this crisis of meaning. But to you, what does that mean, the polycrisis?
Right. If I had a whiteboard right now, I'd draw a very small circle and then just all of these squiggly lines going out of it. The polycrisis is representing all of those squiggly lines. And at the center, there's something that's birthing that. I just think the polycrisis in terms of our humanity and our relationship with the earth. So we have an ecological crisis. And we can look at that graph and split it off into all of the things. We have a political crisis where there's also this splitting off, separation, multiple viewpoints, holding paradox. There's a food crisis. There's like a crisis of insecurity of how to nourish ourselves moving forward, like a depletion of soil, which is related to whether or not we can regenerate the soil of this planet. And the crisis itself is causing a lot of overwhelm, chaos, and anxiety in a lot of people. Mental health, and this sense of hopelessness or helplessness, which ultimately for me stems from a lack of meaning, contextualizing this. So we can look at all of the branches, which are the symptoms, but today we're going to really focus on what's birthing all of those symptoms so that we can really get to the core.
Yeah.
And we know this from a lot of the work with mental health and in clinics and hospitals, that it's not enough to go to the Band-Aids and try to alleviate the symptoms, right? We've heard this over and over. So now we're really starting to look at collectively. Again, we're all doing this together. We're looking at what's causing all of it. And now we're getting into like the deeper truth and the meaning behind what's the beginning, the cause of this, what's birthing the polycrisis.
Yeah, I didn't have words for it when I was younger, but I very much felt it in my body and my mind. I was, like I said earlier, I feel like I've been spending my whole life trying to figure out the symptoms, working in policy and politics, running campaigns, working in education, understanding the history of it, like economic crisis, this crisis in food and ecology and soil, regeneration is a part of this. And I finally stumbled. I love this myth of, we're probably very familiar with the Hydra and the labors of Hercules, but I think it's a really good myth to really encapsulate what's happening. And like what I love about myth is it allows us. It's sort of like a path. It's not super defined. The Hydra myth can be used in many different ways. It doesn't have one meaning. And to an ancient audience, this wouldn't be a metaphor. It's not always it's not symbolism. It's like the myth is our way of our ancestors trying to hand us down a roadmap. And I love looking at myth from the lens of it's a map. So the myth begins here with Hercules. He's born of half mortal, half god. He's the son of Zeus, but not of Hera. And Hera is the goddess that governs family. She governs home, and homes require a level of protection. And this is where she gets her famous sort of attitude of envy and jealousy. It's more jealousy, because jealousy, what it does is it guards, it puts a barrier that says, no, these things are outside of us. This is the home. These are the four walls. I'm protecting what's inside. So sometimes we look at Hera from a lens of villain, but what I love about Thomas More in his book of Care of the Soul, where he goes into a lot of these archetypal patterns, is envy, jealousy, wrath, retribution. These all play a vital role in our ecosystem. They're all important. We don't just relegate them.
Yeah, they're not to be shunned, but it's more wow, there's a reason for these. And this gets to this both and mentality that we'll explore.
Yeah, it's not either or. So Hera is the jealous one, and she is protecting what's happening in the family, and Zeus has one of a million affairs. And Hercules is born from this affair with a mortal woman. And Hera sends snakes to his crib, and he has superhuman strength from his god side. And so, like in the famous like Disney movie, he like picks up the snakes and smashes them together and throws them off. And Hera's like, wow, okay, like I need to take this a different angle. Like strength is not is going to be his gift in this world. So she eventually, when Hercules grows up, he marries, has a family, and Hera takes a different angle, and she makes him mad. She drives him crazy, and which is an old adjective in myth of like this holy madness. And Hera inflicts madness on Hercules, and in a stupor one night, he ends up killing his family, and he lives with that grief. And he wants to make it right. He wants to, what we call in like Greek mythology, like catharsis. There's like a ritual purification that needs to happen, which I love that word catharsis because we use it in a way that there's a cathartic experience, like you need to like move something out of your body. But a Greek understanding is that it's a ritual purification. And so he goes to live with a prince in a different city, and the prince gives him 12 impossible labors. And the second labor is defeating the Hydra, the serpent of Lerna. Lerna is this place that is a great expanse of swamp. There's poisonous bogs. It's a marshland. Like think about even like Lord of the Rings when Frodo and Sam and Gollum are like trenching through the dead marshes is kind of how I picture Lerna in my mind and imagination. And the Hydra was actually born of the father of all monsters, Typhon, and was sent by the Titans to guard this swamp. So the monster in the story isn't really a monster. It looks like a monster to Hercules because he's the hero. However, the Lerner serpent, the Hydra, is sent as a guardian of these swamplands. The prince orders that Hercules needs to go defeat the Hydra and cut off its heads. And so he goes on the second labor, and he brings his nephew with him, who's called the Light Bearer. And Hercules goes with his like hero-esque sort of personality and just starts slicing and dicing the heads off of the Hydra. But we know the story. For every head that he cuts off, 3, sometimes the stories say 50, sometimes they say 100 more heads popped off. And it wasn't until the Light Bearer, his nephew, got into this pattern of taking a torch and what's that word when you seal off the head, the stump? Oh, I can't remember what this is called. Anyway, you just use the fire to like seal off the head. And it wasn't until that the head stopped growing out. And eventually Hercules was able to pin the Hydra underneath a rock. And he takes his knife and he draws blood from the Hydra, which in the story later, that's the way he dies. He actually gets poisoned by the poison of the Hydra many years later from his own dagger. So this myth, I'm just kind of curious of like how that myth sits with you and how it fits with the polycrisis, and I'll kind of round up from there.
Yeah, I think the challenge is trying to aim to cut off the heads. Yeah. Do what seems like the easy thing with what we're good at, the one thing we're good at. And this is like looking through a myopic lens and being like, oh, one remedy for everyone. And the moment we cut off the head, 5 more sprout out, 100 more sprout out. There's for me, listening to the myth is like, oh well, the Lightbringer has the solution. We seal off this cut, we seal off this wound so that it can't grow again. And his name is the Lightbringer. And eventually, you need to pin down this Hydra. It's not even about the heads; it's about getting to the heart, and cutting into the heart, looking at the heart of the polycrisis. So the heads are representing all of the multiple symptoms that are sprouting, and it seems to be never ending. It seems like there's more and more separation in the world. There's more and more opinions and ideas, and less of this rejoining, reunion. The original meaning of religion is to link. So relinking, yoga is to yoke and bringing things to union. So for me, it's like, let's bring it to the heart of the matter and focus on something collectively. And this is meaning, giving meaning to something.
Yeah.
And we ascribe meaning to it.
Yeah. What I love also about this myth is it kind of represents for me in my imagination of like the shadow. To me, the polycrisis is the shadow of like our human state. There was something that happened a long time ago that I still don't really understand myself that separated light from darkness. And when darkness gets repressed, it ends up coming like a ravenous monster, but it's not really a monster. We see this in our internal psychology. We see this in our world. What is within is without. So above, so below. And so I love that the Hydra is not defeated. We say it's a monster, but it's not really a monster.
Yeah, it's a guardian.
It's a guardian. And there was something that happened that made this relationship between the civilized demigod, Hercules, who believes himself as a hero and his own hero story. He's trying to save himself and his family and the people of the city from the Hydra.
And redeem himself.
And you can't kill the monster. The monster's not meant to die. One, because it's not a monster. It's actually pointing inward to see something within what's happening internally, but also collectively internally. In the shadow form, we try to address the polycrisis by, how do we message this policy? How do we build more wealth in the world? How do we alleviate poverty? How do we medicate people out of depression and anxiety? How does science heal disease? So many different angles, but they're all, to me, what I feel at the core is like, again, these are all Band-Aid solutions. And sometimes you need a Band-Aid. There's no problem with the Band-Aid. We're not saying don't do anything with the Band-Aid. I'm glad and very happy that there are really smart people working in policy and politics and economics and soil regeneration and renewable energy and all sorts of different ways. But for me, what didn't feel satiated was like, no, there's something deeper. And I personally don't want to work on the Band-Aid level. I want to work on the interior. I want to work at the roots, at the depth of it. So from there, let's start unpacking like the depths of this crisis of meaning. I think what we're saying is like in the inner circle of this polycrisis is a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
So let's really dive there and spend a lot of this conversation like understanding that piece.
Great.
Yeah.
And the work is about restoring depth. It's not like we have to go out there and find depth. It's the same thing as our purpose and the essence of our being. And it's all inwards.
Yeah.
And all these myths are always pointing us inwards.
Yeah.
Where do I find this in myself? So yeah, let's unpack it.
This might seem like a roundabout way of getting here, and we can address this later too if we want. But I'm just curious for you because I sense this sometimes when we talk about like, let's go, it's always in the interior. Something I see in the spiritual world that we both very much live in is sometimes when we keep going back interior, sometimes that feels like it like shifts to be like this sort of like self-absorbed like spirituality. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective. I want to kind of address that first.
Yeah, it's almost like we can overcompensate the other way. And I fell into this trap myself.
Yeah.
And I think what I'd like to unpack from this is this like patho-adolescent mentality, that it's all about me. That's that self-absorption piece. One of the traps on the spiritual path is we sit in these ceremonies, we go on these dietas, and then we create this idea like, oh, I have to keep working. I have to keep working on myself. If only I just work on myself first, and then I can finally bring myself forward. And it's actually a both and. You can continue working on yourself, but you have to see that everybody else is working on themselves too. And the sooner we can open ourselves back to the world and realize and find safety and continuity and this sense of becomingness and maturation, opening ourselves to hold multiple perspectives, which is the ability to hold complexity and to hold paradox. This is the skill of our time. We're living in this highly fast-paced information age where we're constantly looking to how to progress. And it is important, and it's beautiful that we get to do this work. But at the same time, we've got to slow down and integrate our experience as it's happening. Because if we don't take that time to rest and digest, we're going to continue to get into the state of chaos and actually hijack ourselves out of presence.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of this comes from like Tyson Yakampora. He's an indigenous scholar from Australia, and he tells a story about why the emu becomes the like national symbol of the Australian flag. And it comes from the dream walkers, the Aboriginal people of Australia, where they have a myth, a creation myth, where there's serpent, there's wombat, there's kangaroo, and there's emu. But the emu becomes so self-absorbed and gets inflicted by the spirit of narcissism that he ends up threatening all of the world by destroying it. Like, it's the very essence of narcissism that has the ability to destroy the world, because it's out of relational balance. Everything in indigenous world is all about relationship. And so the emu sort of like has to be bound. Kangaroo kicks him in the chest. Serpent like bounds his feet. Wombat, I don't know, hits him with his butt or something.
It's 3-on-1.
Exactly. And they bind and still the narcissism of the emu. And so it becomes this myth of sort of like, I think this is the affliction that the human ego can go through, especially when it hasn't gone through necessary stages of initiation and development. That our gift to the world is our ego. Like, our ego separates from the rest of the world, and it allows us to actually be grateful because we can see what other things are doing, and we're not totally enmeshed in it, that we have a distance, a separation that allows us to see the gifts and talents that everything else in the ecology is providing for the health and nourishment of the world. And so it allows us to be grateful, but the opposite of gratitude is narcissism. And narcissism is the very vehicle that can also undo ecology and the web of relationships. So I think that's a beautiful, for me, that's such a beautiful myth to encapsulate an element of like this piece that we're going to talk about around maturation and maturity and why it's so necessary.
Yeah. Beautiful. So along those lines, what does it mean that we've grown wide but not deep?
Yeah, to grow wide. I think our culture, in a lot of ways, I'm pretty harsh on our culture. Unfortunately, I've been trying to work on a little bit more patience with it, which is more patience for myself, because I see this in myself. It's wanting to, it's this superficial layer. It's this like shallowness of not wanting to go. We're scared of the depth. I think there's good reason to. I don't think it's like, I don't think it's a mistake that the Christians labeled this place hell. It's dark, it's scary, and it is filled with monsters, quote unquote. And so I think everything in our being doesn't really want to go there because we know it's dangerous. There's an element that I think I don't want to play like, oh, the underworld is just as safe as the upper world. There's a reason why I think in mythology, like, and I think healers and shamans and magic people and religious specialists from all over the world and different traditions, I think they have a general sense of like, no, we want to be able to go into the underworld, but we don't stay there for long. And there are elements of danger there. And so many cultures spent a lot of time like mapping these places and guarding it and having protection around it because there is an element of actual danger there.
It's dangerous for the ego.
It's dangerous for...
There's a dissolution process that I'd like to unpack with you. And there's also dissonance, cognitive dissonance. And I'd love to unpack what that means. Like, what does it mean to actually go through the depths? Yeah. And it's like an automatic response that we don't touch it. It's like, oh, don't talk about... I'll just give a personal example. So I grew up in a household where we were all slowly separating and becoming more and more depressed and glued to our screens kind of thing. And it's like, nobody told me not to talk about it. It was inherently, I felt this tension, this dissonance of like, I can't talk about it. It's too challenging. It's going to bring up too much. I'll just go to my room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of thing that I'm in touch with so many families out there. It's like, don't talk about the thing. Just keep progressing, keep moving, keep shining. And it's like on Instagram, you either show your best self or you hide away for weeks until you finally can show your best self.
Yeah. And we do this in our friendships a lot, where it's like, I don't feel like going out today. I'm going to cancel this thing that I committed to. And there's this element of like, yeah, we are learning to come out of like a burnout culture that says you have to be on all the time. And there is right relationship with ourselves to say like, I am going to take space. But what I also see as a reaction to that is people isolating themselves and separating and always putting like in the guise of like, I'm going to do what my body needs me to do. It's often, I see there's an undertone of like, I don't want to address the awkward moments. I have conflict with someone, or I just don't feel like my best self, so I don't want to go out. And that's an element of like, I think staying wide of like, we curate our lives. We curate when we want to be seen, when we don't want to be seen, what elements that we allow people to see. Even in our most intimate relationships, we do this. And I think and I'd love you to explore this more on a psychological level too. I loved what you said about there's a natural sort of like protection mechanism. There's a guardedness because we do feel this tension. And we want some disassociation with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a part of our psyche, the ego, that wants to keep things the same.
Yeah.
Keep things knowable and keep things comfortable for the identity, this personality that we have. But there's this deeper part of ourselves. I'm going to call it the soul, or in Socrates and Aristotle will call it the daemon. And this is, which actually the word demon is a diminutive of that word daemon. So daemon is your higher potential. And there's this higher potential that's waiting to be released, cracked open in you. And a lot of the mystics like to say that this divine spark is given from the great, great divine. And it's split into this multiplicity. But the beautiful part of this story is that we're all fractals. We're all holographic images of the total. So there's a part of that within us that's just like yearning to be expressed. And we have these miracle moments, these beautiful moments in our lives where something breaks open. For me, it was like turning away from my computer after hours of gaming, and my grandmother was visiting. And I just had this realization like, oh my gosh, my grandmother's visiting and I'm just glued to this computer. And I look over at her and I'm like, I got to connect. I got to connect with you. I got to rejoin this, like the family unit, that kind of thing. I've been avoiding for too long. And I actually feel this low sense of self-esteem and self-confidence to be who I am. And just something opens from those beautiful moments. And we've all had these moments. Our guides, our teachers, our mentors. We can at least pick one or two people in our lives that really truly saw us and even saw right through the barrier that we created. Because we create this barrier of like, fine, I'm okay. And if someone asks me how I am and I'm not okay, I know I don't want to burden them. They're just checking to see if I'm okay, and it's like, it's a symptom of how fast paced we are and not taking the time to really drop in with each other. So I'm grateful for these moments, just being in a podcast room with you and just like, we're dropping in and slowly we're dissolving this sense of like, oh, I'm supposed to present myself a certain way, and we get to just be who we truly are. And I think that's the remedy of this, like restoring depth is also uncovering who we truly are.
Yeah, cracking that shell. I love how some of the mystics talk about like the soul is the handmaiden, the ego is the handmaiden to soul. Like you actually need, but sometimes I think in the spiritual world, we tend to like demonize again the ego, like it needs to be dissolved. And there isn't a level of dissolution that does require the ego to go through to mature. But it's not like we get rid of the ego. The ego isn't a bad aspect of ourselves. It just needs to be matured so they can work with the soul. The soul often contains the vision, the imagination of of how we can give back and serve the world.
The
and
gnosis, the deeper knowing that resides within.
Yeah.
And so what is the role of the handmaiden? Just quickly, what is the role of the handmaiden, the ego, and what is the role of the soul? And what role would you give to the soul in that context?
Yeah, to me, the ego is this part of matter. It lives in the material world. It learns how to function in a 3D world, and it's necessary. It's part of why we're here. Is to live in the material world. And the ego helps us navigate that. It is the part of us that is able to do things, actually make something. And the soul, I feel, contains the imaginal realm, the mythic realm, the area of ourselves that is our purpose, that is our meaning, that is our depth. And so in this way, I think when the ego can mature, it has the ability to serve the soul and the soul doesn't have an aspect of itself that is able to make matter, to make material, and to make it what Bill Plotkin would call a delivery system into the world, to make it the vision of the soul meaningful for culture and for land in that specific context. So in that way, I think they need each other. They're like both wings of a bird. And if the bird only has one wing, it doesn't fly. We need to be able, a mature adult, I think, are able to, or at least a process to be able to learn how to fly, learn how to make both wings equally balanced so that the bird can fly.
And they're coordinated.
And they're coordinated.
The limbs are coordinated.
Yeah. And so this gets us, I think this is what we're talking about is how, if we're talking about the crisis, at the center, there's a crisis of meaning and purpose. And what I hear from you is this is a crisis of soul, ultimately. So yeah, from your perspective, where does one start? What does this process look like? What is this development aspect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an acronym that I've come up with very recently, thinking about the content of this podcast, and it's closer. So C, you have, and this is also speaking to how to become a mature adult, which is all tied into this. How do we move from this adolescent state of me and mine, giving in order to give, receiving just to get, but not giving back. So there's, I'll just unpack the acronym. So C is commitment. L is loyalty. O is offering. S is slowing down, making downtime. E is equanimity. And R is regulation. So commitment, having a sense of something that you're committed to on a daily basis, whether it can be your job, it can also be a deeper sense of vocation, something that we're working on to eventually give to the world, the greater community. L is loyalty, and this is sense of community and a sense of people that we are serving, and bringing ourselves into the ecology of where we live and how we serve the places we inhabit. And from there we have O, our offering. And this is something that's cultivated over a deep sense of time. It's not something that's created in one day. It's meditated upon, it's journaled about, it's something that's slowly breaking you open so that finally through the act of creating the offering, you're discovering, oh, it's been this whole time. And this is why I'm so fascinated by the work of the Gene Keys, because it's about polishing the diamond. And in order to polish the diamond, you need pressure to make the diamond in the first place, which requires darkness and a lot of time. S is the slowing down, making downtime for yourself. And this might not apply so much to people who are in Pisac. We have a lot of downtime, but still living here, I find a way to fill up my days, and I'm just like, what is going on? But especially for the modern culture where we're filling up our schedules a little too much. So create a sense of downtime with your partner, with your kids, if you have kids, with the people who mean the most to you. Equanimity. So finding a way to cultivate the sense of balance in all things, and to see challenges as opportunities in our lives. Not to fall into the same unconscious patterns of like, oh, bad thing happens, I need to avoid, I need to get out, I need to not focus on it. This was bad.
Yeah.
It's actually something happens and it's like, I can work with it. I'm going to grow stronger from this. The friction in the relationship, what allows the maturity of the relationship to truly unfold. And then R is the regulation, having emotional regulation for when things do impact you strongly, not to be harsh on yourself, and to, again, see it as a growth opportunity. The mistakes that we made end up being our greatest lessons that we can learn from. So a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy is focusing on reappraising our situations. So something happens, we notice the thought that says, oh, this is bad, I don't want this, it's spinning out. Notice that and recreate the story around it. Realize that you're equally creating, and you're equally a participant in what unfolds in your life, what you create.
Beautiful. And like, how, from your perspective, does this, if we cultivate these aspects of ourselves, how does that address the core of the crisis of meaning to the soul, to those aspects?
For me, it's like bringing it to the personal level. What can I do? What is the work that I can do? One, we go from a phase from I judge the collective and I become hopeless about the collective, versus like, what are the aspects of what's happening in the crisis that I can take into myself, and in what way can I eventually contribute? In order to make the jump from adolescence to adulthood is to do that work of dissent. And for me, part of the dissent is not only dissolving the world that I think I know, or even being able to dissolve the story that I have about the world, and come into a place of gentleness, spaciousness, this beautiful yin space, to then, it's like emptying the cup so that I can refill myself. And I did this with yoga practice, I did this with meditation practice, and I've done this with isolation in nature, plant dietas. Empty the cup, and then journal about it, write about your life, be honest. And all of this acronym CLOSER is just bringing you closer to yourself, so that you can then bring the true self forward.
Yeah. And the way I see it is like, when we say bringing ourselves closer to ourselves, what I hear is bringing ourselves closer to the soul. For me, so much of our, like, the center of crisis is that we have so much, we don't have a strong connection with soul. To me, it's not like a religious term either. To me, it's an ecological term, and this is something I'm borrowing, and I think this is a good time to like step into maybe Bill Plotkin's work around soul maturation. That the soul isn't inherently a religious term. It's an ecological term. The soul contains, like we were talking about before, like a shard or a split of the totality of oneness. But it's the individual piece. I think so many times, again, in our culture, we're really worshiping the above. We're like trying to ascend and go to the light and become all oneness, but we forget the foundational work. And the foundational work is actually your individuation first. Before you head up to oneness and ascension, you need to go down to the depths first. And I think one of our greatest mistakes is we have really demonized this below area, this descent aspect that I'll get into. And we just try to shortcut it and go, if we talk about, again, that question of like, how is our culture going wide but not deep? The wide aspect is we're trying to ascend. We're trying to get somewhere. We're trying to create a utopia. We're trying to become oneness. And before that, like we really do need to descend. And the aspect of soul to me is, it's not a religious term, it's an ecological term. It's that piece from oneness that contains a unique niche, a unique gift, a unique talent. That only this one precious life, from Mary Oliver, this one precious life, our whole aim is to really allow this thing isn't ourself. That part of ourselves that says the I, that's our ego. It's a great part of ourselves. But there's a deeper aspect that is, this is the gift that I am waiting to be born into the world. And it often doesn't reveal itself in a really particularly helpful way. It's often very mythopoetic, and it takes a while it's a journey of a lifetime to figure out how to let this thing be birthed out of me.
When we say mythopoetic, it's looking at symbols, dreams, images, the beautiful synchronicities in life, the people that cross our path. And the poetry aspect is like making meaning of it. And actually, the greatest poets can bring it down to the essence and then communicate with words, with feeling, what that is. Yeah,
so I often look at the work of like, sometimes like Tolkien. Tolkien's a really good example of, I think, a very soulful person. And a couple aspects of this is like his work of a modern mythology for our time is deeply soul-oriented. It's not something that when you read Tolkien's journal, he doesn't talk about like, this is coming from me. In fact, he actually talks about kind of like a daemon, this sort of like entity that's outside of himself.
And he's focused on, how can I bring this forth?
How can I bring this forth? And so he actually talks about, like in his journal, like he would enter dream states or trance states. Again, not using ethnogenic plant medicine like a lot of us are in a modern day, but a practice of like connecting to what he calls is like an elf. There was an elf that taught him elfish and taught him the history of the Middle Earth. And then he spent his life delivering that to an audience through fiction and fantasy that can really speak to our soul. I think that's one of the reasons why so many of us are gravitated to the work of Tolkien after so many years, because it contains that essence of soul. It's kind of the same way that when Jung talks about it, like his soul work was, he understood from his red book and the red journal that his whole life's work was really based off of these series of listening to the dead. His son started getting visions of ghosts for 7 days and 7 nights in Jung's sort of like Dissent phase, where he's able to experience the numinous. He is actually able to hear the voices of the dead for 7 days and 7 nights. And they basically dictate to him the whole field of psychoanalytics. And then he'll spend the rest of his life from an ego standpoint figuring out how to deliver this. He doesn't talk about this in his pivotal works. He saves this for his journal. And it's not until 2016 where the journal is released that people even have an aspect of like, oh, he's actually channeling the dead. And this is the way I feel like the soul speaks. It's often things like, you are the one who speaks to the dead. You are the one who sings the rivers back to health. You are the one who takes death and decay and composts it. You are the one who sings to the heavens. It's all in these like mythopoetic terms. And Plotkin talks about this in his work. I think this is another, for me, it's a really foundational author and very pivotal person in my life that was able to like give a kind of mapping to this process of maturation. I'm kind of curious from your perspective if you want to like dive into the sort of the descent. What does that mean? The adolescent ego? What are the structures of the adolescent ego? How does it descend? What emerges after?
Let's take a pause.
Pause?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, we're back from break. Where I love this conversation is like we have started with like this idea of like the many hundred-headed Hydra, this polycrisis, that we're trying to get into this like idea of like, what is the depths? What's the root of this? And we've addressed this crisis of meaning. which we are finding even below that is a crisis around soul. And I really want to take a quick point to make, like, I love this word crisis because it's such a negative word in our culture, but the root of crisis is actually the pivotal moment of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we say crisis of soul, crisis of meaning, crisis, polycrisis, this is such a pivotal moment for our culture, for us individually, for us to shift and transform into something else. I think it's such a ripe moment. So I'm kind of curious, we left off with a question of, like, basically, like, how does one go through this crisis individually? How do we get from an adolescent ego to a soulful, lived, mature adult life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we got, just to give a visual, we got patho-adolescent culture, the adolescent ego, and we have the adult ego. And actually, it's not a straight line to get from one to the other. There's a descent, and then there's a climbing back up. And
the pathological adolescent ego is, like, to me, what it represents is, like, you have a whole culture of adolescence. It's not that the being an adolescent or having an adolescent ego
it's not bad.
It's not bad. It's that it's not going to be a healthy culture if you have a whole culture filled of adolescents, and you get the patho is the stuckness.
Yeah.
It's like we don't actually have a lot of elders. Because we don't have a lot of adults. And we don't have a lot of adults because a lot of our culture is stuck in this adolescent ego structure.
Yeah.
Okay, take it.
And we can get into, like, the conspiracy of the media, like feeding that over and over. And it just goes into, like, addictive cycles.
Yeah.
The best way to sell someone something is to show that they're lacking that thing. So yeah, we have the adolescent ego. Part of the maturation of the adolescent is to discover a sense of belonging to develop a sense of identity in the ego into a personality to then deliver to the world, to be liked and to belong to the social structure. So as mammals and very incredible social creatures, that's built into the structure of who we are. That's our blueprint, is to belong.
Yeah.
Because that brings us safety, nourishment, and resources.
Yeah, we need to belong. We need a sense of personal authenticity. And sometimes in our culture, personal authenticity and social belongingness are actually at friction with each other. And so oftentimes we choose social belongingness, but we deny our personal authenticity. When we deny social belongingness, we end up becoming sort of like rebellious counterculture movements that aren't more mature. They're just the same level of immaturity, just reactionary. And we need a sense of, like, the world is alive outside of our own selves in our own culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the ego is nourished by a sense of belonging, and the soul is nourished by a sense of contribution.
Yeah.
And the soul, like, and a ripening.
Yeah.
You know, think of, like, the fruits of our labor, and actually, like, the long term, being an elder is to be the tree providing the fruits.
I love what Martin Prechtel talks about. He says, like, my greatest goal in life is to die like spiritually ripe fruit for the gods to feast off of.
Nice.
Which is, like, if that's our goal in life, is to be like fruit that can nourish the soil underneath of us, the next generations.
Yeah.
That to me is so beautiful around a goal towards life.
Yeah. And Walt Whitman also said something like, may I be the tree to which my grandchildren eat the fruits of, that I won't actually see. I won't actually see the children eat these. Yeah. But may I be that tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we go from, what does this descent look like? How do we navigate it?
Yeah. So we have preparation, dissolution, soul encounter, this, like, coming back out of it, and then having the enactment piece of having something to contribute.
Yeah.
So these are Bill Plotkin's stages. He's done a ton of Vision Quest work out in the Red Rocks.
The Animus Institute.
Yeah. Incredible human being. And for me, part of it is the willingness to make the descent, and it's a choice. Nobody's going to make it for you. Nobody's going to push you off the ledge, so to speak. I love the bringing in the tarot into this. The Fool card is Fool like card, dancing on the edge of the precipice. And this, this idea of this he's willing to risk it all just to enjoy, to be enjoy and to enjoy life. And it starts with an adolescent mentality. Let me try this out.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
I love how he talks about this is like, when you're sort of going into this descent, because like you feel like you're at all in wonder. You're like looking at the edge of the cliff and you're like, oh God, am I going to do that? And you're like, yes, there's no other way.
And what happens in the body, that exhilaration, standing on the edge, looking over. So yeah, this is, the edge isn't a physical edge. It's a psycho-spiritual edge. It's a mythopoetic edge. Yeah. And as we grow and embrace that edge, we haven't even jumped yet, but as we grow and embrace the opportunity presented to ourselves, there's a stretching that happens. And then we dissolve, just like the caterpillar goes into the cocoon to dissolve itself, and those liminal cells bring it back out to be a butterfly, and then the wings push to break out of that cocoon.
And I like this imagery of the cocoon because it also, the butterfly is not a caterpillar. The caterpillar dissolves, it dies. And this is what's like really terrifying about this whole process. The ego can resist this descent process because inherently it is dangerous. It's psycho-spiritually and sometimes physically dangerous. What I love about old earth-based cultures and initiation rites is they knew this technology. It's a piece of technology. And as much indigenous culture have I studied, and as so different and diverse all the different initiations were, there are some core aspects I'd love to talk about. One, you were not meant to be functional during this period. And on a modern culture that's so obsessed with you being responsible and functional, this process can be really uncomfortable because you're not going to be able to be functional. We'll talk about our own descents at some point, but in my own experience, I was always the dutiful, responsible teacher, sort of principal archetype. And for me, when I was going through this process, I was not functional. I could not hold a job. I could not barely take care of myself. I just wanted to sleep all day. It looks like depression. It looks like anxiety. It looks like something we can medicate ourselves out of. In old indigenous cultures, they knew this. And so they actually just removed you from the village. Parents had a mock funeral as a ceremony. So because you might not actually come back. And if you do come back, you're not going to come back the same. Yeah. You most likely would get a different name. You couldn't marry in indigenous society, have kids, or hold any vocational role without being initiated because it was too dangerous to have adolescent culture hold those functionalities for the whole culture. And so elders would remove you so you could be deranged. Francis Weller talks about this idea of no, we need to become deranged. Let grief derange us. And that's so terrifying to our individual egos, and it's terrifying for our culture. It doesn't make any room for it. And it's quite hard to actually carve the space that can be several years. It could be several months, could be several weeks, could be many years. And as we don't have such a connection to into earth, our ancestral rite of initiation, this process tends to be a lot messier and more painful and harder. And so the ego goes through that dissolution.
And just to bring up another example, in the Shipibo culture, in the lineage of becoming a maestro, they're out in the jungle in isolation for months and maybe a whole year, maybe multiple years, to commune with a specific plant spirit. And they do this multiple times. They have ikaros for each of these plant spirits that are passed down through the ages. And this is an initiation to connect to a subtle frequency of a plant spirit, which is speaking as a whisper. And then it becomes a song, and then it becomes an ikaro, and then it becomes a healing gift to the participant that's in front of the maestro.
The song becomes sacrament.
Song becomes sacrament. And part of the meaning is restoring what is sacred. Yeah. And Carl Jung said there's not one client that he worked with that it wasn't about restoring a meaningful outlook. Everyone he saw, it was about restoring a meaningful outlook on life, restoring hope, and beyond that, restoring faith, the trust that I'm on a path and it's all a part of the path.
Yeah. Side tangent for another little myth, but I love the myth of Pandora's box. When she opens the box, anguish, strife, jealousy, envy, murder, anxiety, depression, all of these ills of society come out of the box, but the only thing that's left in the box is hope. And this isn't naivete. It's not just hope for hope's sake, but there's there's a knowingness that there is something really deep and meaningful in life.
So yeah, the time that we're taking to talk about this is a reflection of what it takes to make a leap. So it's not this like, and that's this like shiny thing. I hope I say the right words. I hope I look good. You know, it's not that kind of thing. It's like, actually let me dissolve to the point where, I don't know. Yeah. It's like bringing yourself to, for some people it can be an extreme low point. Like for me, it was my alcohol addiction that like brought me to this like rock bottom. Or during COVID, another initiation where it's just like, I'm going in, I'm not going to see anybody. I'm going to see what's there for me. And it was a sickness. I was sick for a period of time and got through it and came out on the other side with a lot of learning about myself.
Yeah.
And I was on my own during that. And I think that being on your own is a really important part of it. And it's why darkness retreats are getting super, super popular now. And Vision Quest, it's like you connect to the community is holding you, and then they say goodbye.
Yeah.
And go find yourself.
Sometimes I think our culture is really, they look at a lot of these new age spiritual practices and the hype around it. And they're like, oh, this is just another novel experience that people can participate in. But I see, yes, that's true. It can be. And there can be a lot of just like, this is another experience that I want to pay for. But what I see is a yearning of culture of this process of initiation. Yeah. It doesn't have a lot of language or maturity around it. But I do see a yearning for our culture to mature. And I think we need to. I'd love to hear you started talking about your own dissolution process. If you want to go into any other parts of that.
Cool. I think the big one is the dieta for me, the dieta experience. So 2019, I was doing a lot of work sitting at La Pacha, and the dissolution doesn't necessarily happen within one ceremony. It really can't. To really give it the time that it needs and to treat it like a sacrament, you got to put yourself in a space to truly go deep. And first of all, it's the honesty of, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I had quit my job, and that was my whole sense of meaning and purpose and identity, was that role in that position. And I remember that whole summer, I was not able to hold a conversation without crying. And thankfully I had a mentor of mine, my aunt, who basically affirmed my experience and said, great, now listen to your body, like meditate, like just be, create space for this. So that's number one, is slow down, see what's happening, and create space for it. And hopefully you've got a mentor. And this is what eldership is all about, because elders know. Elders have been through it and have seen people through it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So if you don't have a teacher or a mentor or something that the apprenticeship comes later, but it's like,
you need a guide.
You need a guide.
Yeah. And in a culture that doesn't have a lot of elders or even adults, this is something that's really missing. And it can actually stretch this process out a lot longer unnecessarily. Yeah. It doesn't have to be as painful. Yeah. But unfortunately for a lot of us, it is really a very dark and painful period that is unnecessarily long, because we don't have a map, we don't have a framework, we don't have a culture that can contextualize this experience for us. It often looks really hostile to it, and there's not a lot of guides that can even, like, for me, that was so pivotal too, is just someone saying, what you're experiencing is normal. You're not crazy.
Yeah, it takes time. So For me, it was going into a plant dieta and working with Papa Roberto from Pauyan in Pucallpa and doing 21 days. It was at that point as the longest dieta I'd been in. And again, going back to the acronym, it starts with commitment, a commitment to the self, the commitment to the soul, and the commitment to be open to the mystery. So it's a great way to start. The Shipipo like to say when you limit your intake of food, stimulation, sugar, caffeine, all the additives and addictives, then you really create space for soul. And I took some days to not eat any food. And in the tradition, it's like it's an offering. You're giving up your hunger for the medicine.
Yeah.
And beginning with a commitment, whatever it is, write it down and put yourself into a portal, so to speak, and like put yourself into days and days and days where you're just like, I'm here, I'm here. I present myself. So there's a funny story about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana where he locked himself in a room and he's like, I'm not leaving until I get a song, that kind of commitment. So dieta is great because it gives you a long sense of time, and actually the medicine's working with you through your dream states as well. So there's like just a continuation, and it's important to have continuation. It's the same thing in meditation practice. If I meditated for 5 minutes, took a break, meditated for 5 minutes, took a break, and and then at the end I have an hour, it's different from meditating for a full hour. Something happens when you sit and allow. And this is the art of contemplation, where you can come in with a question and you sit and you don't come up with the answer. Something is working through you to give you the answer. And this is how I view divinity, divine presence, guides. This is how I view animism and something that is speaking through us, to us, that loves us so much that we are actually part of, and we're an individual aspect of the greater whole. Or else how could we be talked to and listened? How can the communication happen if we were not part and parcel of that? So that's the dieta experience, is learning to soften, and the medicine just slowly weaving its way through the cells and the digestion in the sense of tamamori. It's like working through the digestion and just like, yes, let me nourish myself just through my journal. Let me nourish myself through smoking my pipe and just swaying on the hammock and listening to the trees, and then slowly you drop into the subtle vibration of the plants, and you just nestle yourself there, and you are, and that fast-paced, fragmented mind that's bursting into thousands of other thoughts is quieted down to the sense of there's an open aperture to the lens of more of the holistic, the universal, the natural element that's spiraling in the spaces between the words, and get to pay attention to that. And then we come out of that with a new sense of ego, where it's like, oh, I can act in the world with this knowing. And it's just like, you take a bite of a lemon, you taste a lemon, and I know what that tastes like. That will never go away. And I can just think about the taste of lemon, and I'm feeling it. It's the same thing with connection to a source, and connection to the deeper well, the deeper sense.
Yeah.
And once you get that taste, you can cultivate that connection. This is the integration piece. And so
I love how you talk about how it's a cellular transformation.
Yeah.
That was my experience too. And many people who diet, I think, have this experience. And I think this, again, initiation can really happen in many different ways. There are many different practices around vision quest. Fasting is usually involved, of water, of food for many days, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. Dancing, like sun dance or moon dance. There are many different ways in order to go through this like liminal space. I think both you and I share the Dieta experience. For me, this process felt like the dissolution process felt like psychosis. I felt like I was going crazy. And that was the most terrifying thing for me, because my identity is about being a stable, rational, put together, I'm a successful, ambitious person. And my part of my mythology as an adolescence was like, I'm never going to experience madness like that. And yet, mythopoetically, I was teetering with madness a whole bunch of times. Like, I was always drawn to those archetypes because there's something there. And I remember when the process started happening, almost in one day, maybe 1-2 days, I lost my job. That was my whole identity. It was a very painful loss of job. Painful relationship broke up the next day. I was living in San Francisco. You cannot live in San Francisco without a job for more than a couple days. So I lost my house. I lost my car. I lost everything that I had built. And I literally have never felt this experience outside of this, of being like, I'm afraid. I don't know who I am. A lot of mystics talk about this experience of like, this is the point where you lose your identity. And we talk about ego dissolution all the time, but like the process is really fucking painful. It can be really long. It was, for me, like a diet, I thought it would like fix it, but it just made it worse, to be honest. I took off way more than I could chew, and I went for 5 months for the first time. And I laid out on the floor with Kami Norako that heals grief. And I did not make any sense of my experience. It was just 5 months of like living hell, of laying on the tumble floor in fetal position crying. Not having anything to cry. It was just grief was pouring out. And it took many, many years, multiple years, to understand and digest that experience. A lot of instability during that period. I wasn't very functional. I was not a good person in relationships. I couldn't hold it together because it took me longer to realize that I wasn't meant to during that period to do it. And luckily, like you did, I also had a guide. She was a practitioner of the lineage that I was working with, of the Ashaninka. And basically she was like, yeah, my process was 7 years. Tatiana's was 5. Like Andre's was 4. Like, this might be a while, so buckle up.
These mentors, these mentors give us perspective.
Yeah. And they're like, literally, I just needed a person to be like, you are not actually crazy. You don't, I was going to the doctor all the time, trying to get like brain scans and CT scans and blood scans. I was like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. I was seeing a psychologist. Luckily, I had a psychologist at the time who also understood this other aspect and was like, you don't need medication. That's not going to help you here. So many of us go to psychologists in the Western world, and the first thing they do is, here's medication, here's medication. And I was really thankful that life sort of provided these people, because I was very obstinate. I was like, no, I'm going crazy. There's something happening. It's in my body. It's in my mind. I need something. I need this to be fixed. And I just had the right mentors, the right guides at the right moments who were like, no, this is normal. This is good. You're doing a good job. Keep going. And it wasn't until the Tamamori diet that I sat with the plant in day 1 of Dieta, and I was like, look, we're not going to do any of the hard stuff this time. I need you to help me integrate. And what I love about working with plants, because they are direct access. There's so many access to the animate world, but I love the visceral tangibleness of plant medicine. That's what spoke to me a lot. Many pitfalls in that area, but what I loved about it was the plants listen. The spirits of nature listen. The spirits of the land, your ancestors, however you want to see that. They listen when we offer. And I was offering my experience of Dieta to the Tamamori and was like, look, I really need this to be a gentle experience. I don't want to dig up a lot of stuff. I need to integrate for my own well-being. And that whole 2-month dieta was all about integration. And this is where it all started to like come back together, and I started feeling myself go up and into the like metamorphosis and adult phase. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for allowing me to share mine too. I think it's really important for people to like not to intellectualize the process of going down, but I think hearing stories of other people's downness can be really helpful.
It's not a space for the rational mind to work anything out. And actually, a lot of what I realized about myself was how quickly I resorted to the rational mind of like, I got to figure this out. Okay, what's the problem I'm solving? And just like it just goes in spirals, right? It just like takes you through loops, and it's not until you just like, I'm just avoiding opening to the mystery. I'm afraid, and so it's like you take your ego with you on the descent. And your ego is like in the backseat, like, are you sure you want to do this? It's like freaking out, and your soul is there. Hopefully, you have this connection to a sense of I'm going to ride this through. And some preparations aren't able to make the full descent, and that's okay too. I've had plenty of preparations where I'm not making the full descent, and I'm like backing out of it, and that's okay too. You're just not ready.
Yeah. And if you force it, it could be actually really dangerous and catastrophic in a way that's not helpful. Yeah. So bring us out of the descent. How do we get to the adult?
Yeah, so we have the enactment phase. And through this, it's what have you learned? What have you discovered about yourself that you now then can participate and heal others, help others? Healing is wholeness. It's not a sense of like, I'm healing you. It's like, how can I integrate? Which is also a sense of how can I discover a sense of wholeness within myself to now enact that into the world. And so this is the medicine of participation. So I'm a student of Richard Rudd. He wrote the Gene Keys. He has this beautiful quote around participation. He says, "To live meaningfully is to participate in the nourishment of the whole." And I just love this word nourishment. When we nourish, we think of the soil. We nourish the soil, and the soul is our soil. It's the lifeblood. It's the life force that moves through our blood. It's the prana, and we also nourish our bodies. So we have the soil and we have the body, and this is finding a way to be in the mundane. It's finding a way to be that sage that's flying through the mystic and also has grounded and is here to be a beacon for others.
Yeah, not to transcend, but to be able, to me, it's about being able to go fluidly between this world and that world.
Yeah.
From the upper world to the lower world. Yeah. But living, we are meant, I think if we're incarnated into this body, we are meant to be here on planet Earth in the material world. And we should have access to these other worlds, but we don't primarily live in them. We then bring those gifts and that nourishment back to this world. Yeah.
This is in India, Neem Karoli Baba is just laying and smiling and embracing everyone who comes to see him. This is the sage with that warmth in the heart. And I've always gravitated towards teachers with the warmth in the heart. And I've worked with teachers without that warmth. And I just haven't gone back. And it's teachers like Diego Palma, which is like have the sight and have that warmth in the heart that's like you can really, truly learn from. Not that anything through words is transmitted. It's transmitted through the frequency of the heart. Yeah. So the idea of enactment and developing a mature adult ego is to be in service, to cultivate a gift or a talent, apprentice to a master that has that gift and talent over a period of time, a long period of time, working with, learning from, and cultivating your own sense of what that is for you, your unique essence, your soul niche, and then giving it, right? The gift, giving it.
Why do you think so many people in a modern culture have such a resistance to this like apprentice working with the teacher aspect?
It's hard to say. The first thing I go to is yoga teachers and getting a 200-hour yoga training and calling yourself a teacher. Hopefully you've got a teacher that you're learning from for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I'm not saying like, don't then teach yoga. Like you learn through the practice of teaching yoga and continuously being a student.
But so many stuff are sort of jumping right to,
Right.
I've had my first dieta. Now I'm going to serve ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Oh, I took some psychedelics. Now I'm a guide. I don't want to work this corporate job anymore. It's soulless. To me, there's this aspect of like our culture actually, it's not so much the problem with the individual. And I think we like as a culture really tend to like, tend to really say there's a lot of grift in the spiritual world, but I don't think there's any more grift in the spiritual world than there is in the medical world or in the political world or in the economical world. This sort of like, our culture only gives us a few options of like, you can repress it, your gift, you can repress it, you can be insane, or you can sell it. And I think a lot of us just jump really quickly into this, that aspect.
Yeah. So as a closing question that we can both respond to, how do we grow from overwhelm to contribution? So I'll answer this and then I'll give it to you.
Cool.
So for me, number one is living with wholehearted courage in the face of uncertainty. A meaning is not discovered by escaping the dark, but actually turning toward it and moving into it. And it's going to be messy, and we have to be okay with being messy. And we have to reduce the perfectionism and get to the heart of the honesty and facing ourselves and looking ourselves in the mirror and growing from that. And the last one is you begin to realize, and this is part of the enactment phase, that your offer to the world, your gift, your talent that you want to give to the world, it's not to alleviate the world's suffering, and it's not to move us away from our suffering. It's actually to move toward it. And it's our direct participation in it that is guiding the collective through it. The sooner you realize that you are an agent in the world to move the collective, the sooner the collective begins to move. And this is how we be the change in the world, is we directly participate in it. And we move through it together. We all have our individual awakenings and our individual descent and moving out of it. Now we get to move others. And this is what it truly means to be an adult. And over time, move into being an elder in this world that deeply, deeply needs mature adults moving into eldership.
Yeah, I think the question is beautiful. Like, how do we move from overwhelm to contribution? And to me, this encapsulates the whole conversation around depth, the meaning of depth, what our crises are, how we enact our soul and our vision of our soul, and how we move from adolescence to mature adulthood. And something that feels really personal to me is a really deep connection with the more than human world. To me, it's a great source of resource. It stabilizes, it regulates. To know that there's a whole host of forces out there that are working on our behalf. Not all of them are our friends. I'm not saying that. It's an ecology as well. The jaguar is not your friend. But there are lots of things in the more than human world that are our friends and our allies, that we're not doing this alone. We have a host of living elders and adults that are here and guides that are going to be. We have our ancestors. We have our plants and spirits that we work with. To me, to move into a state of overwhelm to a state of being resourced is to grow our own capacity.
Yeah.
And I felt like one of the best ways for me to do that personally is to be more cognitive of and more in relationship with the more than human world. It's to wake up to the mountain and look at the mountain and greet it. It's to offer prayer and beauty and song and dance to the river, and to light the candle on your altar to your ancestor, invoke them, bring them into your space, and they resource you through dreams, through vision, through the subtle body. And I feel like for me, that's a great source of capacity. And the more that I feel resourced, the greater my cup is full. I think I spent my early life trying to fill everyone else's cup while my cup was half full, and I would just keep burning out. But now that I have found ways to fill my cup and keep it full and overflowing, I'm able to give more.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that my cup is overfilling, I'm not holding, I'm not grasping for more. Life is a bounty. There's abundance here, and there's lots of gifts of nature. Spending more time in wild spaces is a way that I think that we can spend in solitude and silence, not shifting and not turning away, like you said, from our darker aspects, but embracing our grief, our anger, our jealousy, our envy, and becoming really curious of like what they're asking for us to do. So for me, at the ultimate end is like, it's relationality.
Mm-hmm.
To move from overwhelm to contribution is to realize that you're in a web of relationship, and it's not your problem. I love what the Talmud talks about is like, I'm not going to quote it really well, but it's like, don't let the world's grief like take away from you, but also don't turn your back on the world's grief too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you don't need
this attitude of like, oh, not my problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's an adolescent attitude.
Yeah.
It's like, what's going on here? Leaning in with curiosity.
Yeah. But it's also not always your problem.
Yeah,
and it's both. It's the paradox of living in that complexity of like, don't turn away from the world's grief, but also don't turn too much to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard balancing act. Yeah, beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was super fun.
Is there a way that people can reach you? Anything that you want, any events or anything that you're offering that you want to shout out to?
Yeah, I work with the Agora Academy. It's a nonprofit that I founded a few years ago. I really wanted to bridge this gap with teens. I love working with teenagers. And I think it's a really potent time to spend time in wild spaces. So you and I both live here in the Sacred Valley in Peru. I chose this place because of Mount Asancate, that's to our north. And I think it's such a beautiful place to do more immersion work. And so I really invite adolescents. This is really age 15 to about 24. I think it's a ripe time to spend time in wild spaces. And so you can find me at agoraacademy.org. And I offer regular pilgrimages where we spend time cultivating these myth and aspect and storytelling and time with the animate. Yeah.
Awesome.
And what about you?
Yeah, so the organization I founded is called the Wellspring Within, and we offer Huachuma, San Pedro hikes. We also do preparation and integration as part of the package. I work at a center called Anahata. It's in Lamai. It's just down the road from Pisac. And we work with a Shipibo Maestro, and these are week-long or 10-day retreats with 3 ceremonies. What else? The Psychic Garden is a project that I co-founded with Brady Williams, and it's a retreat center. It's a venue hire. It's an event space, so people can rent us out, and we can cater to groups of up to 80 people. And we do our kirtan there, weekly Wednesday kirtan. It's really important to have like a weekly cadence of something, because I don't have a 9-to-5 job here. So it's really nice to show up to something that's weekly, and it's like something that's benefiting myself and benefiting the community, to sing together, drink some cacao and sing mantras and sing the beautiful holy names of God, and in that tradition of bhakti. And so yeah, come to us. If you're in Pisac, come every Wednesday at Psychic Garden from 2 to 6.
Beautiful. Yeah, I want to mention a couple other things I kind of forgot too. My work I like to do without medicine. So I love that you offer the medicine. I specifically don't work with medicine, but really work specifically on trying to build a subtle connection with nature immersion. So deep time and deep space. And we didn't get a lot of time to talk on the podcast about mythology. So we'll have to save that for another one, but I write mythology and I teach a weekly mythology class here in Pisac. And I work with young kids, in how to through myth, understand a more mythopoetic, imagination and the faculty of dreaming.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I want to leave off with one of my favorite questions to end the conversation. What are 3 books that you would recommend? And I'll share mine afterwards.
Okay, great. I would recommend Bill Plotkin's book, The Wild Mind, as a starter. And it's a field guide to the psyche, and it's working with 4 directions, 4 aspects of the psyche. The second one is The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. Number 3, I would just say those 2.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Yeah. For me, I love the poetic work of Martin Prechtel. He's a Tutsahila Maya elder in the Guatemala area. He's indigenous to North America, but spans those. And he wrote a beautiful book called Long Life, Honey in the Heart. I think it's one of the best books I've read, and you have to listen to it. You can't read it. It's an indigenous elder who's speaking, and there's something potent about the way he speaks. And he shares a story, but it's also about his initiations, as in multiplicity. And primarily it's around his initiation becoming an elder and what that meant in this village in the 1970s. Beautiful book, highly recommended. The second one would be Francis Weller, in The Wild Edges of Sorrow. You read the first 3 pages and you're just weeping. And it really, to me, it really elevates the role of grief and how grief is a catalyst for the whole conversation we had today. At the very end of it, I think we're experiencing a lot of collective grief. And grief can be a portal into depth. It is a portal into depth because it is like water. And the third I would recommend is Thomas More in Care of the Soul. He uses a lot of mythology in this way. And he really takes the harder, darker aspects of the human nature. So things like rage, retribution, jealousy, and envy. A lot of our darker emotions that we somehow feel like we trick ourselves that we need to grow out of, where he makes them, again, necessary for the health of the whole. These darker emotions, and there's a way in which to work with them that's not repressing them, but that's welcoming them, like how Rumi talks about welcoming these guests to our table, a banquet. And when we start to do that, I think we start to see a huge transformation. And his book was really pivotal in understanding, for me, depression. How depression isn't something that you need to medicate out of or get rid of or grow out of in your life, but it's when you welcome it, it transforms. So those would be my 3.
Thank you so much, brother.
Yeah, thank you.